just the mysteries of the deep we're discussing this morning, the mysteries of the skies and other planets. Matt Ford here on talkSPORT, asking for your alternative theories on the Titanic and what happened. So an amazing story. Also this week, the FBI released previously classified papers relating to unidentified flying objects. I spoke to a man last night who's a bit of a UFO hunter. I'm joined now by Tony Topping, talkSPORT's residential UFO specialist. Tony, a very exciting week to be talking to you.
It certainly is, Matt. Great to be on talkSPORT again. I was on talkSPORT speaking to Mike Graham about the Roswell incident that had been doing the rounds, and the FBI had released a document via a field agent who'd indicated that during the 1947 period, a flying disc had crashed in the Roswell desert, although there was an argument as to whether it crashed at Roswell or whether it crashed at Corona. Is the issue. But the thing is the military, briefly to recap for your listeners, very briefly before we go into the other Roswell that I wish to talk about tonight, what happened was the disc crashed, and the 509th Bomb Group at the time at Roswell in 1947 issued a statement that a disc had been recovered. It appeared in the media, and suddenly the Air Force or the US Army Air Command altered that to say that in fact it was a weather balloon under Project Mogul. And then I went on to tell the listeners about how it developed, Roswell developed into the transistor technology that we see today, how bodies were taken to Wright-Patterson, and how the suits, so it is said, the suits that the aliens that recovered from the flying disc were actually wearing suits. They were actually wearing special suits that developed into what we see as Kelvar today. And then I indicated to the listeners that, however, there was a guy who was a chief executive who ran something called the American Computer Company, who decided that he'd put on the internet a marketing campaign that began with the question, did the transistor develop from Roswell, as part of a marketing campaign for him? And that all went absolutely horribly wrong. And he ended up with the Pentagon on his doorstep and everyone else. It all went viral on him, and he's never lived it down to this day, because they said that the Roswell UFO crash, Matt, was related to transistor development. But there is various schools of thinking that in fact it was developed by AT&T for proximity fuses in anti-aircraft shells. And so that's kind of like in a nutshell, the very story, the very thing that goes with Roswell, and it branches into many avenues of big story. But what is not mentioned in the media about Roswell is Britain's very own Roswell.
And when was that?
That happened in 1974, and that was on January the 23rd, 1974, and it was called Britain's own Roswell, and that was called the Berwyn Mountains incident.
Right.
And what happened there's a very interesting story about this in the background. Before that incident, on January the 23rd, 1974, police were getting reports in that month all over the country. Special branch were investigating mysterious flying helicopters that were appearing all over the UK.
Okay.
And they were leaving Special Branch absolutely baffled as to who they were, from Birmingham to Derby, all over London. These strange unmarked helicopters that were doing strange flying things that were kind of like piloted by professionals. Now, it turned out that Staffordshire Police investigated this and concluded that these helicopters belonged to American intelligence. And the fact was, there was an article in the Times in that same month that said there was a sudden increase in CIA and NSA agents being sent to the UK. This is very important, before the incident happened. So on January the 23rd, in a place called Ceder Berwyn, which is a 2,000-foot peak in the Berwyn Mountains in Wales, an almighty bang happened. It was a UFO. It said that a UFO hit the side of the mountain, and it actually caused a seismological reading of 3.5 to 4 on the Richter scale. And various witnesses came forward, including an off-duty constable called P.C. Owen. He was off-duty in the local pub, and he said there was a massive bang, and the glass shook in the pub. And they wondered what was going on. And other villagers reported a strange light in the air that had come down and hit the side of the mountain, and all hell had broken loose. And people, quite simply, just wondered what was going on, Matt.
And what was going on?
Well, this is the big question, because what happened then was they declared it a major emergency. Now, at first thought that a plane had come down. That it was an air accident. Now, the story is that a lady, the key witness involved in this incident was a nurse called Mrs. Williams. Mrs. Williams has been deeply shocked and troubled by UFO researchers constantly pestering her for information. But basically, during the incident, Mrs. Williams rang the emergency service and said, "Look, I'm a nurse. Sounds like something's crashed. Can I assist?"
Yeah.
So the authorities said to her, "Well, yes, you can, but we don't know where the incident is. Can you have a look round? Can you have a drive round, see if there's anything you can find?" So, according to her statement, she drove with her 2 daughters 5 miles down this road and saw this UFO parked on the side of a mountainside. The search team, the military and the police that were looking for what had caused this bang were 5 miles in the opposite direction to where she was.
Right.
So they were in the wrong place and she was in the right place. So it is said that she didn't say anything. She kept quiet and drove on in very, very deep shock about all this. And what happened then was that the military actually turned up in the right location and tried to look round for the object, but it wasn't there. And therefore, what they concluded was an aircraft had actually crashed, and they scrambled the RAF and all that kind of thing. So the conclusion was that some sort of object, Kiel University, reckoned that it was a meteor that had crashed into the side of the mountain. Yeah, they reckoned it was the 2 professors from Kiel, and they reckoned it was a meteor that crashed into the side of the mountain. However, one of the locals had people in years ahead. One of the locals had people knocking on his door in suits, asking to see claiming that they were from Kiel University, and they wanted to take this lump of metal away that he had seen on the side of the mountain, seemingly had unusual properties, so the story goes. But what is interesting, Matt, is the lecture I gave about this a few months ago, about this incident. And some of the people from the town came, from the people from Berwyn actually came, and they wanted to discuss what had been going on, and we had to turn the cameras off.
How long ago was this lecture?
And this was about 3 months ago it was, up in Wales, and they didn't feel confident about kind of like speaking on camera about it. But one was a fireman, and the other was a lady who wished to remain anonymous, so we'll trust her confidence. But this is what they said about it. What baffled this guy who had years of experience in the fire brigade, this is the mystery of it. He said, major incident, all hell breaking loose, the fire brigade were not called. There was no fire brigade required, which is odd. The other oddity that was not reported in the general issue of the Berwyn Mountains Witnesses and so on, which we've not read about, is that this woman indicated that some of the children saw this kind of bright ball of light come down before it hit the mountain. And this lady claims that they had to take the children to the doctors because they had burns. And they were the doctors indicated that these burns that they had were like as if they'd been exposed to low-level lasers of some description that had caused their skin to burn. And what you picked up from the people there, Matt, was the fact that they were still, to all these years, actually traumatized and baffled as to what had gone on that evening.
Yeah, is it not possible that it was a meteor?
Well, this is the mystery about it. You see, some UFO researchers say that there was a Navy exercise out at sea and they tried to shoot the UFO down, or they did shoot the UFO down and it landed crippled on the mountainside. Others, Kiel University, who did all the readings of the area, the radiation, indicated that it was a meteor that had hit the mountain. However, this doesn't account for the sudden surge in surveillance that was going on by the American intelligence community in the skies of Britain near that time.
That might have just been a coincidence?
Yeah, well, it could have been a coincidence. It certainly could, but there is documentation that has been released by the Freedom of Information Act in the US that would say that the US Air Force had 2 operational names going for UFO recovery, which was moon dust and Blue Fly, and these were code names for UFO foreign technology recovery. And oddly enough, the British Army had an actual code name for monitoring of UFOs and recovery, which was called Operation Poison Chalice, to which I know nothing about, man. But there is documentation about moon dust and blue fly. So the school of thinking is that the Americans were tracking whatever this was, and there again, as you have rightly said, it could have been a meteor that they were tracking. They were tracking something, and they knew it was coming, but I think they didn't know where.
Right, okay.
And it turned out to be Wales, where it actually hit. They were expecting it, hence the sudden flying mysterious helicopters all over the UK before the incident.
Tony, this is something I used to be exceptionally interested in. In fact, when I was a teenage lad, I was very much into the X-Files and wrote to the FBI, the NSA, so many of them, requesting what they could give me under the freedom of information then, and my postman must have wondered what on earth was going on. And this lad was getting these massive chunks of files from America, and they made for fascinating reading, and I've always maintained my belief that there is life on other planets. But I'm just not sure it's visited us yet. You know, you look at that picture of, the humanoid at Roswell, the famous one. I mean, what's your view? Is that an alien we see there? Or not?
Well, yes, you see that, as I was saying earlier, you see, but believe it or not, the US government was closely watching all this in more ways than one, and there's three schools of thinking behind it with Roswell. Was that A, it's an alien from another world, and B, it's the workings of demonic entities that are manifesting as UFOs. And then there's the other...
What's that?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, what happened there was that the US intelligence community, before the establishment of the remote viewing programs and psychic espionage that they did, when the UFO incident crashed in 1947, they formed Majestic 12, which I'm sure you'll have heard of, Matt. However, due to the research, excellent research of researcher Nick Redfern, he researched that there was another organisation doing the rounds called the Collins Elite. And the Collins Elite were investigating the fact that these UFO objects, and it started at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base with funding by the CIA, and it was indicated that the Collins Elite were looking at the subject of UFOs as to them being a manifestation of something demonic. Oddly enough, there was a major UFO incident in Nuremberg in about 1492. And at the time, in Nuremberg, it's on the internet, man. I can't remember, but basically it's the newspaper of the time in 1492 describing strange people going down the street with flying objects in the sky, or flying dragons or whatever, emitting obnoxious fumes. Now, what would happen was the US Collins Elite would look at that and say, that is a security issue, what's that all about? So what they were doing, they were studying folklore, myth and legend to try and find out if the Roswell UFO incident was a demonic manifestation.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is what they did, and it's quite normal for the Collins Elite to approach the police and the Catholic Church regarding demonology at the time. They really were studying it very closely.
And does the Collins Elite still exist?
The rumour is that they do to this day, that they still exist. Their belief being that this UFO issue is demonic, that it is a threat to mankind.